Rawson Twitchell runs inside. Rawson Twitchell into the second level, the 10, the 5, touchdown Butte County.
It's time for another weekend of high school football in Idaho, and it's time for another edition of Gem State Game Day.
Simmons to throw. Going deep down the field. He's got a man isolated. Did he catch it? He did. Yeah. In traffic. What a grab by Guy Wheeler.
Before you head out tonight to cheer on your favorite team, get caught up on the latest news, notes, and previews from this weekend's Gridiron action.
Here's the snap, and it's intercepted at the 10-yard line. That's Bodie Brackenberry. Jackalow sniffed it out.
Gem State Game Day is brought to you by Valleywide Cooperative, Project Filter, and the Idaho Transportation Department.
This one's going to go all the way, 70 yards, no flag, touchdown Valley View. Austin Belknap, 70 yards to the house. Buckle up, here we go.
And buckle up, and away we go, guys. Here we are. This is the Gem State Game Day Prepcast for all you early morning risers here in the Gem State. I'm Paul Kingsbury, filling in for the Brandon Baney. And joining me this morning are first Ryan Scaggs, host of the North Idaho Prepcast. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine this great morning. It's cooled down here in the valley, and it's nice. I love the weather.
Yeah, it's about the
it's
same.
Good for elk hunting for you, right?
Yeah, great for elk hunting.
All right, I've also got Mr. 8-Man himself, the co-host of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast. It's Will Hoenike. Not Hoenike, as you might
not Hoenike, Hoenike. Number one, who am I replacing? And number two, am I the only one here who showered?
Possibly. It's been a long week. We're not sober now, right?
Here or something? Do you know something I don't know?
You're not replacing anybody. It's a rotating cast here on game day.
Okay.
It's at the mercy of whatever Brandon Baney decides, says, hey, here's who we have this week.
Okay. Well, I'm proud to represent the people out there that cannot grow facial hair.
Well, I'm sure there's a few of them out there, ladies. First up, let's take a look at last week's headlines. First up, of course, fortune favors the bold. Of course, we're talking about when Homedale defeated Fruitland last week, 29-28. Luke Henry scored the game-winning touchdown on a 3-yard run, 4 minutes to play. Homedale then went for 2. I love it. And Henry ran it in for the 29-28 lead. I love it when they go for 2. Next up, got David Slay's Goliath. First-year program, Court of Christ stuns previously unbeaten Lakeside 60-58 in overtime. Lakeside now 5-1. Court of Christ 2-4. See what they did there. David Slay's Goliath, Court of Christ, Bible. Next up, the playoff picture taking shape. Teams that have officially wrapped up league titles are Rigby and Skyline. Other teams that can officially clinch league titles with wins this week: Coeur d'Alene, Rocky, Eagle, Bora, Preston, Moscow, Kimberly, Snake River, Grangeville, Nampa Christian, Firth, Rimrock, and Council. So a lot of teams can lock things up this week, guys, and we're going to talk about quite a few of them. We were talking in the green room about how there's a lot of great games this week. Sometimes there's a lot of crappy stinkers towards the end of the season, but not this year, right, Ryan?
No, there's some absolute dandies this week. I know that we'll get to them when we do our picks through each classification, but you look at some of the stuff that's on board this week and next week. I mean, it's a dandy as far as what we got scheduling wise this year towards the end of the season before the playoffs. I mean, it's like you get set the table. It's like playoff games for 8 straight weeks now because of how good the games have been the last few weeks.
100% right. Well, let's go to the uncut gem of the week. It's the most exciting game as picked by Brandon Baney. Mountain View 28, Bora 25. Will, we're going to kick it to you. Tell us what you think.
Obviously, Mountain View getting the win. They get a touchdown pass with 4 seconds left to go in the game. Valentin Gomez-Ricks, 192 yards rushing, had a great game for Mountain View. Keeps them in that at-large conversation on that at-large bubble to potentially qualify for the 6A state playoffs. On the other side, Bora's lost. That snaps their 5-game losing streak, and it also and I say this with my tongue in cheek, it robs us of the first place on the line game this week with Eagle. Now, however, if Bora wins, they would move ahead by courtesy of tiebreakers, but it's not two teams tied for first that are playing at this point. But a great win for Mountain View. It's one that they definitely needed and will definitely help their case, courtesy of the secret herbs and spices recipe that Max Preps uses to rank its teams.
That's actually a good way to put that. I like it. I'm going to use it. Yeah, it's consider that stolen, by the way.
Okay, that's fine. You can't share what I'm gifting to you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Well, that's a 6A game. Let's go right into the 6A schedule, guys. Taking a look there on the left, you've got all of the current standings heading into this weekend up there in the Inland Empire League, up where you are, Ryan. Coeur d'Alene at Post Falls, Lake City at Lewiston. Not a bad game between them, is there?
No, that's the old schedule of the IEL last year. I mean, Lewiston obviously went down to 5A this year, but I mean, that's a really competitive league. Lake City sneaky at 4-3. They do have the one loss in conference. They lost to Coeur d'Alene in a tough battle last week. If they could bounce back, get a win at Lewiston, and maybe sneak a victory from Post Falls, you might be seeing that T-Wolves team in the playoffs very quietly having themselves a great year. Coach Hout does a great job with that group. But that Coeur d'Alene Post Falls game, this is the de facto league championship game. Coeur d'Alene gets in with a win. They clinch the title. They're going to be the number one seed out of the North. Post Falls is going to have some work to do and get a win over Lake City to get their way onto that bracket line. But it should be both great games. I look at both those games up north this week being dandies.
In the Foothills division. Oh, go ahead.
And of note, too, Lewiston opens the first game ever at their new P1FCU athletic facility there at Lewiston High School, the new gorgeous school there in Lewiston. So I know the Bengals are looking forward to starting things off with a big win there at their new home field advantage.
Yeah, you always want to christen that new field with a win, don't you?
Absolutely.
Kind of disappointing if you don't. All right, Foothills division of the SIC, Timberline at Rocky, interesting one. Capital at Middleton, Meridian at Centennial. In the River division, Eagle at Bora, Cuna at Boise, and Mountain View at Owyhee. In the High Country Conference over in Eastern Idaho, Rigby at Hillcrest, Highland at Skyline, Madison at Minico, and Thunder Ridge at Blackfoot, which also could be a good one. Now, we kind of talked about picking games that we want to talk about. I'll go first in this one for the 6As. My pick to watch this week is Skyline versus Highland. And, two different divisions there. What does it matter? Well, it matters for momentum heading into the playoffs. Skyline 4-0, 5-2 overall. Highland 1-1 after that beatdown they got against Rigby, and 6-1 overall. It's really a non-conference, like I said, momentum game heading into the playoffs. Highlands, one loss to a very good Rigby team. Skyline, their losses to Morgan that we saw there in the Rumble, and then a 1-point loss to Madison, 28-27. Next week, Highland has a must-win game against that same Madison team, and Skyline has it a bit easier closing out the regular season against fourth-place Bonneville, but both of these teams need to springboard into that playoff picture, especially Highland with the win after this one. So, Ryan, what's the game you've got?
I'm going to go homer and pick up north that Coeur d'Alene Post Falls game. That's going to be a great ball game. It always tends to be when you play in Post Falls, you usually get a great game. 2 years ago, Post Falls snuck out the win against the Vikings, got them their first ever league championship outright. Post Falls can still win. I mean, if they're 0-0 in league right now, if they sweep Coeur d'Alene and Lake City, they're going to be league champs. So not a lot of people are talking about that they can still play quote unquote spoiler, but both great teams and two vastly different style offenses is Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. Coeur d'Alene likes to ground and pound, and then they'll send it out over the top with Caden Simmons. He's got a bevy of wide receiver talent out there with Colby Cooey and Kai Wheeler on the outside for the Vikings. So should be an interesting game. I think you're going to see Post Falls secondary get really tested this week. We know what their front seven can do against the run. They're coming off of a loss last week. They got drubbed by Moses Lake, which is a pretty good team from the state of Washington. But we'll see how that Trojan team can respond in a really nice rivalry game.
Ryan, I heard they did a scientific study on Simmons, the quarterback, and they found that he got 100% of his athletic ability from his mom, none from his dad. Crazy.
Yeah, I'll let Corey know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I hope he watches.
We'll
All right, Will.
Give Nicole all the credit. Yeah,
That's right. Will, what do you got?
My area of expertise is the smaller divisions and the smaller classifications. So I don't know the teams as well as Ryan does, obviously. But the game that caught my eye, and I already tipped my hand a little bit, was that Bora Eagle game coming up. Now I'm assuming that Taylor Kelly and John Helmendaler aren't at Eagle anymore, and I'm assuming that Austin Bolt is no longer at Bora, and insert the slew of tremendous players both those programs have had over the years.
Austin does have a pretty sweet mustache now at BSU.
Who does?
Austin Bolt.
Does he? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. So again, representing.
This
was going to be an undefeated SIC against an undefeated SIC before Bora was knocked off last week. So Eagle being the number 2 team in the state, I want to see how Bora bounces back from a tough loss down to the wire. They were 5 yards and 5 seconds away from winning that game. Can they bounce back against a really, really good opponent? And if they do, they put themselves in the driver's seat for a really good qualification spot, if you will, in the 6A state playoffs.
Speaking of those 6A state playoffs, let's take a look at the bracket right here. If you can see that, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks in the 6As. With all of them, actually. We talked about that a little bit. Right now, if the playoffs were today, you've got the Max Preps rankings on the right. You've got what the bracket would be. Of course, the Rocky Mountain is the West 1, Rigby is the East 1, Coeur d'Alene North 1, and Eagle West 2, like you said. And then Middleton Timberline, Post Falls, Mountain View, Bora, Highland, Madison, Kuna. That's who it would be today. Take a look at those Max Preps rankings on the right, though, and Timberline, Kuna could fall out of favor this week. Owyhee could raise their stock. I mean, it's really all about increasing your stock and not lowering your stock these next couple of weeks. And with those Max Preps rankings and in that 6A brackets, good indication.
Yeah, you look at that number 12 at-large bid with Mountain View sitting in that spot right now. The teams that are in front of them. I mean, quietly, Lake City, if they can pick up maybe a split with Lewiston and Post Falls. I don't know if it's enough to climb that mountain to get into that, ranks of 13, 4, 12 right in there in the Max Preps rankings, if that's enough of a lift. But Lake City, if they can win both games, I mean, obviously then they're in. You win, you're in. If you're Lake City at this point, you get Post Falls, you beat Lewiston, I think you're there. So that's a sneaky spot to look at with that 12 at-large seed. Just because of the teams that are sitting there, they still have maybe some losses in front of them too. And that's the other thing that can be really dangerous. You look at Meridian could get some wins. So that's definitely the picture is muddy at best, I think, at this point, because of how many games are still left and the teams that they're playing each other. So, I mean, you can knock down the totem pole pretty quick on this one.
Well, you take a look at the actual rating for those. You've got Post Fall at 16, Middleton 16, Timberline 15, Kuna 14, Mountain View 13, Owyhee 12. And those can be affected by a Rocky Mountain win, a Rocky Mountain loss. And Madison, I mean, as teams win and lose, it affects it's trickle down and trickle up.
And even if you're Post Falls, you could fall into the playoffs at an at-large bid. Even if you lose your next 2 games, if things don't go your way with Coeur d'Alene and Lake City, I mean, they could still find themselves in and traveling and hitting the road playing the West number 3 seed. So,
not that they want that, but at least they're in. Right?
Yeah. But
this is the hard part for me, and I've talked to a number of coaches in the 8-man classification. We're talking a lot. We're like just us right now. We're talking about if. The problem is, and this is a problem for a lot of coaches with the Max Preps rankings, without knowing what the formula is, they don't know. They might go 3-0 and not make it. They might go 0-3 and make it. They don't know. So it's really hard for them to prepare for eventualities without knowing what the path is in front of them. And I'm talking specifically when we're talking about these, the race to number 12, if you will. There are others we can talk to as we get a little further down the line that I'm a little more familiar with the argument, the question, if you will. But When these coaches and these ADs and these kids don't really know, okay, well, we're right on the bubble to maybe get into the playoffs. Well, what do we got to do to get there? Well, I don't know. I think if we win, we're in, but I don't know because we don't know the formula. But that's the 1,000-pound anvil that's swinging over everybody's head right now, is trying to best predict the path that they're going to need to get where they need to get.
And that's how 6A kind of designed their bracket, though, is to surmount some of that ambiguity within the Max Preps ranking system, because it is seeded upon where you finish at the end after the crossover playoff in the SIC. And there's the auto bids, obviously, for each classification, so you don't have to worry about it as much like as 5A. 5A is an absolute crapshoot. I mean, you look at 5A, and we'll talk about that one, but that's where that's where rankings come in, because you look at the gap on this right now and you're like, oh, Coeur d'Alene, they've almost got a 10-point gap on Highland. And does it matter really? No, not really, because the brackets are already seeded at 6A and kind of predetermined ahead of time. So really it only matters when you get to those two last at-large bids.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's head to the 5As. You just said, taking a look, you've got, like you said, Inland Empire, Sandpoint at Lakeland, Lake City at Lewiston, in the SIC, BK at Ridgeview, Columbia at Valley View, Emmett at Nampa, Bonneville at Skyview, and then Great Basin there in the Magic Valley, Twin Falls at Burley, Madison coming to Rupert for Minico, Mountain Home at Filer, Jerome at Caldwell, and the SEIC, Pocatello at Preston, big game, High Country Conference in District 6, Idaho Falls at Shelley, Highland at Skyline, Rigby at Hillcrest, Thunder Ridge at Blackfoot. So some cross classification games there in the High Country Conference, moving around, which is good in late season. I think you can get kind of tuned up a little bit. Maybe you don't play your guys, some different things. There's different strategies to go with. But looking at those games, guys, what are the games that stand out to you? Ryan, let's start with you first this time.
I mean, you can look at what's at stake, I think, most for these teams, because if you go to the 5A state bracket and kind of look ahead at that football playoff with the Max Preps rankings and where things sit, Minico's got a lot to lose this week. If you look at that, I mean, I know it's a cross classification game, Minico taking on Madison, but a Minico second loss, I mean, you're dropping in your Max Preps rankings and seeding changes drastically pretty quick. You're still going to get an auto bid as a champ and get seeded, but I mean, it's kind of matters on who you get paired with on that half of the bracket, and if you can avoid the Skyline or the BK in that second matchup. So there's a lot at stake there in that game. I look at that one. I'm not going to go homer. I'm going to take Minico Madison. I think it's going to be a high scoring affair, but you look at Madison's offensive line and what they have up front. Madison is absolutely massive, and I think they're just going to absolutely bully at the line of scrimmage. Don't be surprised in this game. I mean, Minico can stretch it on the outside, but this is the big test. What do we know from Minico? And we'll see it in this one. This will be a huge test as we prep for playoffs for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And playing at Minico is never fun for anybody. It's a pretty hostile environment. Yeah. It's great there. So I picked Nampa and versus Emmett, number 11 in Max Preps, 3-1, 4-3 is Nampa. Emmett's number 12 in the Max Preps, 3-1, 5-2. Now BK, they're number 1 in conference, ranked number 3 in Max Preps. Valley View, Emmett, Nampa, they're all 3-1 in conference heading into this weekend's games. District 3 gets 2 bids, and Nampa plays Valley View next weekend, not a gimme, and Emmett plays BK, rough, to finish the regular season. So winning this week actually becomes even more important for both teams, but especially Emmett.
I absolutely agree with you on that one. There's a lot at stake in this too. I mean, you can get in that top 12 in the Max Preps rankings. Definitely gives you more favorable matchups in that first round playoff game at 5A because you get 16 teams. You're looking at 12 through 16 seed. You're going to be on the road playing a really tough opponent in that first round. So you want to try to climb in the rankings as high as you can. This is Emmett's chance to kind of solidify themselves above that cut line.
That was the same game, Paul, I had circled as you, Nampa, Emmett.
And I figured you did, and that's why I kind of left it open for you to start talking about it afterwards. But
when you just kind of throw on the brakes like a deer just walked out in front of your car, I didn't really know where we were going there. But Ryan basically hit on my reason for eyeballing this game is, you're trying to solidify some footing here. You're trying to make sure you have the best grip on the rope possible when the playoffs start. And the winner of this game solidifies their grip. They solidify their hold a little bit. So that's why I was looking at this one.
All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with the hairless wonder, Will Hoenike and Ryan Scaggs, on Gem State Game Day after we hear this word from Project Filter.
A hit in the morning, another between class, after school, and more before bed. Vaping sucks you in quick. Not to mention all the chemicals and health problems everyone's talking about. That's why thousands of teens are ready to take back their life their own way with My Life, My Quit. When you sign up with us, you'll get a free and simple quit plan that makes it easier to stop vaping. Visit mylifemyquit.com or text Start My Quit to 36072.
Welcome back to Gem State Game Day, guys. We got through 6A. We got through 5A, barely. Let's go to 4A. Take a look at what's going on this week in the 4A standings. Going to be a good one here as well. They're all stacked. In the Intermountain League, Moscow at Timberlake and Bonners Ferry at Orofino. In the SRV, Weiser at Fruitland. That's our Gem State Game of the Week. McCall Donnelly at Homedale. Coal Valley Christian at Payette. The Sawtooth Central Idaho Conference in the Magic Valley. Kimberly at Buell, big game. Wood River at Gooding. And Mountain Home at Filer. Southeast Idaho Conference, Snake River at American Falls. Marsh Valley all the way down at Bear Lake. And in far eastern Idaho, in the Mountain Rivers Conference, Teton at South Fremont. And that's going to be a very cold football game. Very cold. It's if it's cold here, it's probably snowing over in eastern Idaho, guaranteed. That's rough for those guys. So let's start off with the games we're looking at here, guys. Ryan, why don't you start things off with the 4As?
I like that Kimberly Buell matchup. I think that's going to be a really intriguing game. Obviously, you're looking for the driver's seat in the Sawtooth Conference there. Two really good programs. Buell started out, hot as blazes. They got some huge wins to bolster themselves at the beginning of the year. Kimberly kind of stumbled through, sleptwalk a couple games, and now they've been hot of late, especially picking up a huge win over Sugar Salem. That's a group that, man, you look at this matchup here, that is a tasty, tasty game. That's got a lot of implications, not just for league seeding, but also for that state, coveted state tournament bracket as you look ahead, just a few weeks away. Getting the control and getting that bye is going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now looking at mine, I've got Homedale versus McCall Donnelly. And in this one, Homedale stumbled a little bit in the last couple of weeks. They lost by a lot to Weiser 30-6. First time Weiser's beaten Homedale in a very, very long time. And then barely beating Fruitland last week, 29-28. So in the 4A, the district champs get that auto bid. And with number 2 Homedale, number 3 Fruitland, number 4 Weiser, and 7 McCall Donnelly, the SRV is pretty stacked in the Max Preps rankings. They're all 2-1 in conference. So even though McCall's traveling to Homedale, they might be smelling a little blood in the water, the little chink in that Homedale armor. I know Fruitland Weiser, they're going to be pretty big Vandals fans this weekend. They're rooting for McCall to take them down or at least get close. If you can get close or beat a team that's above you, and if they already beat you, that helps your Max Preps ranking after the fact, right? So these other conference teams are really, and we've talked about a lot of them. They're rooting against the big dogs collectively to hopefully help their Max Preps ranking in the end. Will, what do you have?
Well, as a former SRV guy, I live in Parma, for those of you who don't know. You'd think I'd go McCall Homedale as well, but I actually looked at Southeast Idaho, Bear Lake, Marsh Valley. That looks like a game that I don't know if literally Marsh Valley needs it, but I think it's important for them to get a win right now, to get that win in conference and keep that train moving forward, if you will. So I don't want to call it a do or die. I don't know the tie-breaking implications there, but I think it's important for Marsh Valley to not fall farther behind. And at the same time, if Bear Lake's able to pick up a win and solidify their resume a little bit in the eyes of Max Preps, the almighty Max Preps rankings, I think that'd be a really big win for Bear Lake.
Yep, and let's take a look at those at that 4A bracket really quick. as it looks right now, Bear Lake down at 19 out of 21 teams. They've got a ways to go as they're underwater, a negative 32.7. So Snake River, Moscow, Kimberly, Teton, McCall, Donnelly, Marsh Valley, Buell, American Falls looks to be on that bubble for the 8 teams. And then conference champions right now, Sugar, Weiser, Homedale, and Fruitland. So the SRV making a pretty good showing possibly in that 4A tournament.
It's a good group, and you look at it across the board. They play good baseball, they play good basketball, they got some solid wrestling programs. It's a good athletic group, and you mentioned Homedale earlier. You talk about what Matt Holtry has built there with the Trojan program. You talk about building a culture that infects a whole school. The rising tide lifts all boats. I think Homedale is an example of that, and I think that football is the rising tide. They've been such a strong program for so many years, and I, even though I'm a Parma guy and I'm supposed to hate Homedale, it's like, boy, it's hard to not look at what Matt Holtry's done there with that program over the 12, 14, 15 years that he's been there and not be really impressed.
Yeah, 100%. I think Charlie Shepard at Homedale gets overlooked a lot. He's probably the guy that Charlie Shepard came to Homedale. He's assistant coach. He's the son of the great Salmon River football, basketball coach, Charlie Shepard, same name. And just a good guy. He's a basketball ref as well. Just wanted to name drop him really quick to kind of up my street cred.
Hey, don't forget Sister Chevelle, 2-sport athlete in college, and now I think she's a basketball referee too.
Yeah, I think she is. You're right. I like it. I love seeing that stuff. Love it. Absolutely love it. So taking a look here at the 4A football playoffs, if they were to happen today, is there really going to be much of a change, guys? I mean, it depends, of course, on different things. But, Ryan, do you really see much changing after this weekend, next weekend?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, look at McCall Donnelly. Look at what they've got left on their schedule. They have to play Homedale this week. They have to play Fruitland next week. Yep. If you can split, I think you hold steady at 7. If you go 0-2, you're going from the 7 line probably all the way down, to 10 or 11. So there's a lot at stake there for McCall Donnelly for the Vandals, because you could look at Moscow climbing up. They play Timberlake this week, and if they win, they're going to clinch a league championship. So Moscow is going to be, seeded. They're going to probably climb a line or two. Maybe you got Snake River with some tough games still in front of them. That Kimberly Buell matchup, there's a loss sitting there. If one of those teams loses, how far are they going to drop in the rankings? There is a lot there. If you really start digging into this with head-to-head matchups still left in front, there's not a lot of wiggle room for some of these teams sitting between, say, 5 and 11.
In that Buell Kimberly game, it's one of our pick 6 games this week that we'll talk about at the end. And I had to pick Buell because in week 1 we all picked against Buell, and they beat Weiser, and they'd let us know about it. So
if we all pick Buell this week, and then they end maybe that was the kiss of kryptonite to finally get us to back them.
It could be.
Am I one of the pick 6 guys this week by virtue of being on this show?
No, definitely not. No.
You can pick for Brandon. No, never mind. Brandon already sent in his picks.
Yeah, I got Brandon's picks. Yeah. No, sorry, Will. If we ever decide to do a pick 7, it'll probably be somebody else. But anything further down the line, we might select you.
Pick 19.
Pick 19-ish.
Yeah, after your daughter Ava, I'm right after Ava.
Yes, actually, very much so. Very
well,
much. Okay, let's go.
Here's the thing: you just when we get to the end and you do the pick 6 things, I will be the guy shouting from the balcony with Waldorf and Statler. I'll just shout mine out, and they'll be documented here, and everybody can be impressed with how right I am.
Basically, if you just pick the team, whatever I pick opposite, you should do pretty well.
Yeah,
nice.
We can have a relegation system. Maybe Will jumps in on this, and maybe he unseats the bottom seed guy for next season.
I like it. Yep. Let's. I'm in.
I can say that because I'm in the number 2 spot. So
I'm at the number 2 spot. All right, let's go to number
19. I'm down there with Wood River.
I'm taking over. Let's go to 3A. Take a look at the 3A schedule coming up this week. Grangeville at Kellogg, an interesting one, and it's because is Kellogg as good as we think they are? It's been kind of a light schedule for Kellogg. it's been said it's a light schedule for Kellogg. And so going up against Grangeville, that's the test for them. Priest River at St. Mary's, Bonners at Orofino, and the WIC, New Plymouth at Nampa Christian, and Marsing at Melbourne, SEIC, Aberdeen at Westside, Malad at Declo, Wendell at Soda Springs. And in the Nuclear Conference, Firth at West Jefferson, and Ryrie, the Fighting Matt Harris's at North Fremont. Bulldog Harris, the athletic director there at Ryrie, former Idaho sports guy, still number one in my heart. Thanks, Matt. So taking a look at those guys, really, I want to get your thoughts on that Grangeville Kellogg, Ryan, if you have any. When I was taking a look at it, Grangeville's good. Obviously, Kellogg looks to be good, but are they?
Honestly, I mean, you can use like the eyeball test or even common opponent. I think Grangeville's the dominant team within the conference. I don't really think it's close. It's Grangeville and then everybody else. Kellogg, I mean, they scheduled really light. I mean, I got to be real. And like, I'll say, to be honest, I mean, they're sitting there at the 14 line. They're going to, Grangeville is a good team. You look at what they did. They played McCall Donnelly to a baseball score. I mean, they were right there with McCall Donnelly, going up to a 4A team. They played the Southeast Idaho teams tough too. I mean, yeah, they did pick up a couple losses there, but I mean, that's a good team. And Grangeville, they can play, they got great quarterback play. They got a great running game. They got a great defense. I think that's just too much there for the Bulldogs. They're going to get the win. And that wasn't going to be the game I was going to pick either, because I think if you're going to pick a game this week to keep your eyes on, it's either going to happen in the Nuke or in the other conference there down south. But yeah,
I'll start us off.
Yeah, go ahead.
What game did you pick?
So there are so many good matchups, man. You got to put me on the spot right there. Let's go.
You got an email yesterday, Ryan. I got about that earlier today.
Firth and West Jefferson, I think it's going to be an intriguing matchup. I think it's going to be a pretty good game. I mean, West J, we know that they're a decent team. Firth's been a really good team. They've been playing really tough. Got wins over Ryrie and Salmon, but I believe, if I'm remembering the schedule right, I went back into all the teams' pages. But I think that matchup's going to be really good. That's going to be that conference. Those two conferences down south in East Idaho. That's where your state champ's sitting right now. I mean, it's theirs to lose as far as what I see at 3A. We talked about it last night, on Wednesday night with Sean and Joel on the East Idaho North Idaho crossover prepcast episode. But there's just so much talent within that league, and all the coaches are phenomenal. But I'm going to stick in that neck of the woods and look at that Firth game.
Well, you take a look at the Max Preps rankings, Ryan. You look at the top 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 7, Eastern Idaho, right? Yep. Aberdeen, Declo, Westside, Firth, Ryrie, North Fremont, West Jeff. Oh, and then you get Grangeville, and then you throw in a couple WIC, Nampa Christian, Marsing, and then Malad. I mean, that top 7 is all. But another thing to look at, the top 3 are the only ones with a positive rating. Everything 4 to 21, negative. So is that heavy scheduling or crappy teams?
I think
That's
it's
my
both.
hot take today.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
I think it's because they're all beating up on each other. That's the problem, is you're seeing them all take losses to one another, and it's kind of like a crapshoot rolling the dice on who shows up. I think out of all those teams, Aberdeen's absolutely impressive. Declo, to me, has been right there. I mean, Declo has been a great team this year.
And last year.
Yeah. And they were last year, obviously, too. Westside's not – I mean, you can't sleep on them, but I would go all the way down to the 11th spot. You can't even sleepwalk on Malad. I mean, I think they can play with anybody, too. So, like, that's – I mean, you go above that cut line. Priest River is the one team that's sitting out there for me that you keep an eye on. I'd love to see that team make the playoffs. That would be such an awesome deal for that group.
I'm curious to know when Priest River last made the playoffs. It's been a while in football.
It's been a long while, and I'll have to go dig and start asking around a little bit. But
they were always with Timberlake, Yeah. And so it was always, Timberlake was either hosting an SRV team or coming to play an SRV team, Homedale, Fruitland, and they just swapped every year. And I mean, I've gone to Timberlake and in the snow and broadcast that game. I've done them here. And so I'm sure Timberlake leaving, that didn't make any Priest River fans shed a tear.
No, when they came down to 2A, or when it was 2A, now it's 3A. That was a sigh of relief for that Spartan group, and that's a school that went through a bunch of crazy nonsense on the back end at the administrative district level. With, I don't know if you researched much on what happened up there with the superintendent.
I did not research it, no.
Yeah, there's been a lot of wackadoodle stuff going on there. So cool to see that school see success. And they're getting success in all areas. Soccer's been playing really well this year. I know that they lost in districts the other day. Their volleyball team's been playing really tough. That's a group that's on the upswing there in Priest River. And if they can make the playoffs, you talk about a huge deal for that town. That'd be phenomenal.
My game that I picked here in the 3As, number 10 on the Max Preps, Marsing Huskies, 1-1 conference, 4-2 overall. At number 13, Melba, 1-1, 2-4 overall. Melba got beat up early on by Weiser, and beat up. They got some injuries to some key players, and that really kind of screwed up their season. They weren't the Melba of old, but they were going to have a good season, and getting some guys busted up early on really hurt them. And I'm not sure what the status is on a couple of them. I know there was a broken wrist involved. There was a bruised liver involved. I think there was a collarbone. They got hammered by Weiser. But those last 8 slots on the bracket, they go to the highest ranked teams on Max Preps. Number 9, Nampa Christian, probably going to get that bye out of the WIC. So Marsing, and especially Melba, they really need to, like I said before, improve their stock this week. Next week, Marsing plays Parma. Will, you can talk about how that's going to go next week. And Melba plays New Plymouth, and New Plymouth is kind of there and not there as well. I love you, Coach Cade. But that should be a win for Melba, and Marsing should get that win over Parma. What do you think, Will?
I would agree. And I live in Parma, and I'm a baseball coach here. So I know a number of the Parma kids that play football, and they're fantastic kids. I love those kids. They work their butts off. It's not a good football program right now. Marsing is probably going to come in here, and if they're healthy and if they take the game seriously, we've seen it before. We're talking about teenagers, right? We're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old people. They can come in here and they can kind of have their head in their clouds. The homecoming date didn't go well, got grounded for being on the phone too late, whatever it is. They can come in here and not play well, and Parma can hang around a little bit. Parma has they're down on numbers. They're young. They're really inexperienced. And I mean, people who watch this show, I don't need to tell you what's happened to them very much. As one person pointed out to me the other day, I didn't go to the game, but Nampa Christian put 83 points on them and attempted 4 passes in the whole game. Okay. So it's a tough spot for the program. They're trying to build. Those kids are working their butts off. They're doing the best they can do. I don't think it's going to happen this year. So if you're Marsing and you can pick up that win this week in that Marsing Melba game, I had 2 games circled for this one. Grangeville Kellogg, because I think Kellogg needed a win. Okay. They needed that bell cow win. And I think Melba does too. And Melba beating Marsing would be that, wind beneath my wings win, if you will, because, and if Marsing can win that and then they take care of business as they should the next week, they'll be in good shape. They'll be, I don't know how much they would potentially climb off those 2 wins, but if you can kind of sit firm in that 9-10 range, I think you take your chances. And I think that's probably about where Marsing would be, but Melba needs that. They need a W. They need the boost.
They do. And like we talked about earlier with them, with ad nauseum with this, it's not always about what you do. It's about what everybody else does as well that affects that ranking. You can win, you can do everything, but then maybe a team you beat that was higher ranked loses to a lower ranked team. Maybe somebody didn't put enough points on the board. And we've seen that in this new era. And that's probably, I could go off on that. I have gone off on that, how sportsmanship has been thrown to the gutter and to replace rankings. We'll talk about that, I think, in our state football preview show. I've got a classic example of what happened this year to a team. So anyway, I digress. All right, let's see. But 4 down, 2 to go.
Yeah,
4 down, 2 to go. We're getting into the part of the program where Will becomes an expert, which is great.
I can actually act like I know what I'm talking about.
He's going to go grab the green visor and start putting that on, and yeah.
Nice. Well, we're going to give you a chance to do that. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back after we hear a word from the Idaho Transportation Department.
Later.
Here. Go. Thank you.
Hello?
I was in an accident.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I had my seatbelt on.
Welcome back. Gem State Game Day. Will Hoenike, upper left. Ryan Scaggs, upper right. And stuck bottom middle with these two jokers is me, Paul Kingsbury. Happy to be here this fine Friday morning. A lot of action tonight. We've talked about 6A, 5A, 4A, and 3A. Let's get right into 2A, guys. And let's bring up, there we go. Now we will show it. The game's going on tonight in the White Pine League. Logos at Kendrick. We might be hearing more about this in just a minute. Prairie at Troy, Kamei at Potlatch, and Lapwai at Clearwater Valley. In the Western Idaho Conference, Wilder at Rimrock, Centennial Baptist at Idaho City. In the Snake River Conference, Raft River at Valley, Glens Ferry at Oakley, Butte County at Hagerman. In the High Desert, North Gem at Grace. Guys, this is a pretty good slate of games here in the 2A. Will, why don't you walk us through a few of those that and include, I guess, the game you're going to talk about, but which one of these is the one that stands out to you most and why?
Well, Logos Kendrick is obviously a big one. That's a top 5 matchup. Butte County Hagerman, that's another top 5 matchup. Kamei Potlatch has playoff implications. Raft River Valley, playoff implications. But the game I'm looking at, the game that I had circled, is Wilder versus Rimrock. And the reason is simple. A Rimrock win, and they clinched their first playoff berth since 2011. So if you think about that, there are kids, like 8th graders who've never seen a Rimrock playoff game. And the last time Rimrock won a playoff game was in 1993. It was a state championship win at the then A4 11-man classification. That's the last time they won a playoff game. So I think that I don't think you can understate how important a win for Rimrock would be. And likewise for Wilder, don't tell me that they're not keenly aware that they have an opportunity to play spoiler here. And they've played better in recent weeks under first-year head coach Josh Duty. So Rimrock Wilder is my game. Can Rimrock break that playoff drought, or can Wilder spoil some dreams?
Well, and the 4 district champs, they get that first round bye, and the remaining slots go to the highest ranked Max Preps teams. And you've got Rimrock clear down at 16, Wilder at 19, and that top 12, 11 is stacked. So realistically, Rimrock, do they have a chance, Will?
I mean, when you play the game, when you line it up and play it, of course you have an opportunity. The problem with Rimrock is this year, and has been for years, is they don't have a lot of depth. They've got one of the classification's top overall players in Ronaldo Gomez, but if they twist a couple ankles, they don't have that second wave of players that a Butte County, a Kendrick, or a Logos might do. And to your point from earlier, when we're talking about Max Preps, and we're talking about, you look at the Western Idaho Conference, you've got 16, 17, 19, 20. So you're guaranteed at this point, as it stands right now, you're going to bump somebody. If you're Murtaugh, if you're Potlatch, if you're one of those teams, if you're Clearwater Valley, if you're Lapwai, and if you're harboring some hopes that you might be able to sneak in, the thing that is really sticking in your craw right now is that one of those teams out of the Western Idaho Conference is going to get in, and most likely it's going to bump somebody. Last year, Prairie got bumped because of a Western Idaho Conference team, and I believe it was Prairie the year before as well. And that's just the nature of the game. And I think if Notice had been healthier, I don't think that they'd be down at 17. They lost 4 starters for the year before the end of the first game. And that's hard to overcome in the 11-man game, much less the 8-man game.
Right.
And then, Rimrock has had some injuries as well. They went to Tri-Valley, and, the two or three starters, I think, at Tri-Valley, Rimrock, didn't even suit them up, couldn't even play them. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for Rimrock is when they go into that first game, almost no matter who they play, they're going to be an underdog, even if they've had the bye and even if they're the home team. But why the bye is important to them is that gives them a week to rest and get their players as healthy as they can.
It does. And that's really the catch-22. And I do not have a solution. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying it's a catch-22 that the district champion goes, but what if your conference is not good, right? Becoming a sacrificial lamb of the state tournament. Great, you made it the tournament. And unfortunately, you do bump a higher seeded team. I have no idea how that would be addressed. No clue. And like I said, I'm not saying it's wrong or right. It just sucks for the Prairies of the world to get bumped for a team that gets absolutely doused in the first round.
Yeah.
Ryan, you look like you have things to say about that.
Well, yeah, because I was looking at Potlatch's schedule because they've got Kamei this week. They've got Logos next week. And then you look at Logos where they're playing Potlatch, and then they've got a winnable game next week. Kamei with a loss this week. I mean, both those teams, I want to say, I don't ever want to say it's a must-win game, but for both these teams, it's a must-win game. You don't want to end up in that situation where you're relying on Max Preps to do your wins for you when you're looking for a playoff berth to try to get that number 8 seed. I mean, that is a crazy matchup that you get. And you look at the rest of the conference with Prairies, sitting there too. They can't rest on their laurels also because they got to play Kendrick next week. So, I mean, there's a lot at stake within this White Pine League where there's 5 teams that you could realistically be seeded in the top 8 seeds in the state at the state tournament. And then one of them is going to be left out, probably looking at home. And that's unfortunate that we see that because of the South Idaho teams in Western Idaho that end up knocking somebody out. But, that says a lot. You look at Logos, you can't slip up this week to Kendrick and then let a team beat you twice to where you fall to Potlatch next week. Right. I mean, there's a lot of things there. You just can't sleepwalk in this conference. There's so many good teams week in and week out. But the playoff implications are massive, especially when you start going into the unknown calculation of how Max Preps works. I mean, you got to be stepping on the gas. You're going to see teams probably trying to play for that 20-point victory, and they're not going to call off the dogs at the end either.
20, 30, 40 sometimes.
Yeah, I was talking to Clearwater Valley head coach Alan Hutchins over the weekend, and he pointed out, hey, we're 0-7, but all 7 teams we've played to this point are probably 2A playoff teams.
Yep.
So hence you see them sitting a little bit higher in the Max Preps rankings than you'd think an 0-7 team would be. But let's say Clearwater Valley ends with a couple of dubs. Have they injected themselves into that conversation? Quite possibly,
Right.
We talk about sometimes, we were talking about in the what was it? The 4A is Kellogg as good as their record? Okay, the conversation here is Clearwater Valley really an 0-7 team? And could they fight themselves up a line or two in those Max Preps rankings? Potentially, they could.
Yeah, you look at the ranking, they're 0-7, Rimrock 4-2, and there's about 4 teams in between them, right? Rimrock's down below.
Yeah.
Which
I don't know how much but I don't know how much traction Clearwater Valley is going to get playing Lapaway and Troy. I don't know if there's enough oomph there.
I don't know that. I don't know that there is enough either. But if you're Clearwater Valley, you just got to look at it as, hey, we got to go win our games, and we got to see what else happens. And this is where Paul has talked about what happens around you, potentially impacting what happens to you until the computers say you're out. And I'm not saying anything that any coach has not said before, but until there is a line through your name that says you're done, you got to play like you're in the game. You got to play like you got a chance to go on and a chance to really do something. But they're not. I mean, Clearwater Valley, they're not the only team that has really had to run through the gamut. Prairie, Oakley,
Kamei's Butte County. Kamei's had a crazy schedule too. I mean, these
it's wild. It's really wild.
Yep. Yeah. Even if there's an upset, and if you can call it an upset, and Logos beats Kendrick, that's not going to help the people that Kendrick has beaten, because Logos is ranked right underneath them by 7. So sometimes you can pray for that miracle at the end of the season where there's an upset that really helps you, but there's just not a lot of them. There's just not a lot of them at the end of the season. So my pick was, of course, Kendrick and Logos, 5-0, 6-0, 5-0, 6-1, and Logos lost to Butte County. I mean, it's
no shame in that.
No shame, and we were at that one, and it was a fun game, and Kendrick hasn't lost since Lincoln was president. It's been a long time.
It was actually during Lincoln's campaign. He wasn't even president yet. It was during his campaign.
Like I said, you are the 8-man expert. You would know these.
Alan Burr hadn't taken care of business yet.
Aaron Burr.
He was wrestling bears over in Western Illinois somewhere, and on that same day, Kendrick lost to a boarding school that doesn't exist anymore.
Of course, in Cottonwood.
Probably in Cottonwood. Yeah.
Yes.
They probably
no matter what, it's going to be a good game.
Teams,
it's going to be a good game, and so let's see, Ryan, did you go over a 2-way game already?
I didn't pick one yet. I talked all over the board, but I didn't actually pick one. So, there's a surprise. We went off the rails. If I'm going to pick a game, I'm going to look at that Butte County Hagerman game. I'll go out of my district.
It's
again.
Hagerman, not Hagerman. It's Hagerman.
Hagerman, Butte County Hagerman. I think that game.
North Idaho accent. Yeah,
that's right. We'll call it that. I had them last year when they played up here at Mullen. So a team that's not even playing in Idaho this year. No, that Butte County game is going to be great. There's a lot at stake there too. Hagerman's, they've got some dudes too. They've got talent. They got size. That was one thing that was most impressive about them last year was their size. They're physically just big kids, and they've got some speed on the outside. There was, they broke a couple really nice long runs last year in that Mullen game, and I got a chance to finally get eyes on them. And a lot of that team was coming back, and that's the thing that they've shown the success this year. Can they put the right pieces together and get a recipe to maybe? I mean, if they don't steal a victory against Butte County, can they at least keep it close and close that gap so the seeding improves a little bit? And maybe they jump a team or two in front of them that still has to play each other.
Yep. Will, anything to add there on the 2-way front?
No, I think you guys nailed it right there. I think there's a lot of fantastic matchups this weekend, and I don't know how much any of them, other than automatic qualifications like a Rimrock win, I don't know how much is really going to be settled this week.
All right, well, let's move to the 1As. Check out the 1As. North Star League up north, Clark Fork at Lakeside, Court of Christ at Wallace. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one after last week. White Pine, Genesee at Timberline, Lewis County at Deary. In the Long Pin, Council at Cascade, Tri-Valley at Garden Valley, and Salmon River at Horseshoe Bend. Sawtooth Conference, Shoshone at Cary, Castleford at Richfield, Camas County at Hanson, and in the Rocky Mountain Conference, Rockland at Water Springs, Mackey at Chalice, North Gem at Grace. Ryan, actually, let's start with Will. What's the game that really stands out to you on this one?
With me again. I mean, again, there's several that are very important. That Chalice Mackey game. Chalice needs that win to stay alive. The big game up north, Ryan, in your neck of the woods, actually comes next week when Genesee and Deary play. But Tri-Valley, Garden Valley, that's a huge game. Raise your hand if you had Shoshone Cary as a big game. That's a really big game this week, too, in the 8-man classification. But the one that I'm eyeballing is Council Cascade. I think Council has kind of separated themselves a little bit here in District 3. I think they're the I don't want to call them 1,000-pound gorilla, but maybe like a 600-700-pound gorilla. They've beaten Tri-Valley. They've beaten Garden Valley. But this Cascade team, they're a little bit plucky, you know what I mean? And they need a win. I mean, that kind of seems to be my theme today. Teams that need a win. If Cascade wants an at-large berth, they're right in that, 10, 11, 12 ballpark. And, they're somebody from the White Pine is going to qualify. Somebody's going to go in. Cascade needs to solidify their standing. I think they're good enough to be a playoff team. We'll see if Max Preps agrees when it's all said and done. But the key for Cascade is winning games, and winning even an afternoon game in Cascade against a team like Council. That's going to be a tall order for the Ramblers.
Well, I've got an afternoon game as well. Tri-Valley at Garden Valley, and Council that's at number 3, like you said. So both those teams need to keep the ranking above 12 or so heading into after this. So Tri-Valley plays Horseshoe Bend next week. Garden Valley's got a tough one against Cascade next week. So this is a huge game for both teams. I think Garden Valley needs it a little bit more. And this is also one of our pick 6 games. And so it's going to be a high scoring battle, I think, between these two teams. I think Tri-Valley might pull it off. But it's going to be close no matter what, I think.
Yeah. No,
Ryan, what do you got in place?
Yeah. So I'm going to go District 1. I'm going to take that Quarter Christ Wallace game, because if you're Wallace, you've got to put some style points on the board. I don't think they're going to sleepwalk into that Quarter Christ game. And Quarter Christ, I mean, hats off to them. Denke at running back and Clemens at quarterback. They've got talent on that team. And we saw it last week sneaking out that victory over Lakeside. We had them the very first game of the year there in Worley. But
when you were holding down the tent.
That's right. Yeah. In the back corner, literally using myself as a sandbag. But yeah, no, I look at that game because Wallace is sitting there and they're outside looking in. And that's unfortunate, but they're going to be scoreboard watching that Cascade game. How bad, if Cascade gets beat by how much, because they're going to go into that game next week for the de facto league championship. If they can take care of business against Quarter Christ, against Lakeside next week, we'll have that game on Idaho Sports. That Lakeside Wallace matchup is huge because that's the looming league championship game. As good as the two have been in that conference, only one team right now is looking to get into the playoffs. I mean, there's a lot at stake, and that's sad to say that, because you could have two teams with really good records coming into the playoff run and only one's getting in. I mean, that tells you how good that Long Pins conference has been, that they're looking at 3, possibly 4 bids coming out, and you look back east that, there's some other teams that they got some losses in them. North Gem, if they trip and fall, Chalice, if they trip and fall, how far do they tumble down in the rankings? So it's every point's going to matter this week in the wins, because you got to try to climb that rating. Wallace is sitting there at 0.9. They're going to have to try to climb up into that 6, 7, 8 range to hopefully find themselves on the seed line to get into a playoff game.
Yeah, and if you're an 8-man fan, go and you missed it, go back and watch or listen to the 8-man prepcast that aired last night. We talked about a lot of these matchups and why they're important. Lane Kirkland and Will and myself were on that. So do yourself a favor, if you're an 8-man fan, go back and watch that. That was from last night. It's on Idaho Sports or YouTube and Facebook. It's everywhere. But, looking at Kerry and Dietrich at the top, Dietrich probably not thrilled that Kerry came back to their conference. I was at that game, and they're good. Dietrich's good. Kerry is really good. Kerry is a great football team. So I really don't see anybody knocking them off, barring injuries happening to 1 or 2 players on that Kerry team. But up and down, it's going to be a dogfight filling in the rest of that bracket, Will.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting when you get into the at-large categories. You do start doing the number crunching, but I think you're right on. I think, as I look down, I think those top 3, I think Kerry, I think Dietrich, I think Council, I think all 3 of those are just, they're going to be brutal draws for whoever gets them. And in part, we saw what number 1 did to number 2 last week. Kerry just absolutely dominated a good Dietrich football team. Yep. And Council, their only loss is to a good Kamei football team. That's their only loss. So you get those top 3, and then you start getting down into some of the, I don't want to call it the weeds, but I don't know that I want to go play North Gem. I don't know that I want to have to try and stop that Corey Hatch triple option that he doesn't care if it's 4th and 21. He's running the football and he's daring you to stop it. I don't know that I'm thrilled to have to go play them. And I think there are a lot of teams. I don't want to go play Cascade. I don't know that I want to play Salmon River right now. Ty Medley, he's got some numbers. He's got some, he's got a little bit of depth finally. Devin Herzig, he's got another Shepherd at quarterback. I don't know that they're ever going to run out of Shepherds up there in Riggins.
No.
There are a lot of teams that I don't know that there's a ton that separates them. And so the matchup is going to be everything.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you look at North Gem, it's going to be playing Grace next week too. You start scoreboard watching some of these games, North Gem doesn't really have a lot of room to lose here. I think if they're going to, if they drop a game or so, that seed line 7 through 14. I mean, it's interchangeable at this point, just based on what happens.
And speaking of scoreboard watching, make sure you check out the Friday Night Flash tomorrow night. Brandon Baney will be manning the Flash tomorrow night, keeping up updated scores for games all over the state of Idaho. So check out the Friday Night Flash. Just go to IdahoSports.com right there on the homepage. Towards the top, there's a banner for it. Updated scores, and then, of course, all the final scores will be up that night. We're going to take our last commercial break and give Valley-wide a little bit of love, and we'll come back with our wrap-up. This is the Gem State Game Day Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
We're Valley-wide Country Store. For 100 years, we've been your number one choice for food, fuel, farm supplies, and just about everything else you could need to get you through your day. We know you work until the job is done, and so do we. For gas on the go or a little extra to help you get down the road, you can count on us. We are proud to employ your neighbors and to be a cornerstone of your community. We're Valley-wide. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We're here for you.
All right. Welcome back, guys. We did it. We went 6A through 1A. Just a couple more things to do. A little bit of housekeeping. Let's talk about the game stream schedule. A little bit light on the schedule, but heavy in action. We've got Butte County at Hagerman. Dallin and Leif are going to be there. Leif Morrison. I'm repping the Idaho Bowl T-shirt he sent me. I said I'd wear it during the Prepcast this week. Make sure you check out Idaho Bowl.
Send me one.
Yeah.
He owes me one with all the nominations I gave him last week.
Come on, Leif. Let's go.
Well, I'm sure he's watching. He's an early riser. I'm sure he's watching. So we've got Butte County at Hagerman. Weiser at Fruitland is our Gem State Game of the Week. That's going to be a good one. I'm going to be at that one. And then Highland at Skyline is the one that we're broadcasting as well from Rapston. So it's going to be a fun night of games. If you can't make it to those games, you can watch them live and free on IdahoSports.com. Let's take a look at that pick six that I talked about earlier. Just kind of go over these really quick. Scott Burton still in the lead. Ryan, you fell back just a little bit.
Yeah, I think I went 3-3 last week, so I dropped a couple to Scott, but I'm still there. I'm within striking distance. I could actually come back this week and probably tie him if things go my way.
Yeah, there's a little bit. You got what, two different games?
Mm-hmm.
So, you pick Coeur d'Alene, Nampa, Kimberly, Aberdeen, Kendrick, and Tri-Valley. My picks, similar, not similar. We got Coeur d'Alene, Emmett, and Buell, because I'm not picking against Buell again. Aberdeen, Kendrick, and Tri-Valley as well. And that Tri-Valley one, I'm really wobbling back and forth on that. I think it could go.
Is this where I get to shout in my picks since I didn't make it onto the chalkboard?
No, we got to go. We got to close this. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm on the record and I'm saying it out loud. I can't say, fake news or anything like that. Coeur d'Alene's going to win. Emmett's going to win. I'm going to take Kimberly, Aberdeen, Kendrick, and Tri-Valley.
This is kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where Will's picks don't count.
No, they don't. They don't kick at all. They don't count at all.
I think those are good picks, though. I think all of these.
Get one or two of them right.
And Ryan's the one that picked these pick six games this week.
Yeah, I went up on the level of difficulty this week. I think there were some tough picks there.
Yeah. As long as I get ahead of Sean by the end, I'm in the basement every year, and I don't want to be in last place again.
Take the hint. I'll figure it out.
Dude, they keep asking me back, and I think they're asking, I'm the last kid picked. It happens.
We need somebody to occupy that bottom line. We just know that
somebody has to finish last.
They looked at it. They went, we got 5. God, Will or Paul? And they're like, Paul. Yeah.
Being
Will
CEO
make it too
competitive has its advantages.
Well, guys, it's been fun. Brandon should be back next week. I have no idea who he has selected as the crew for the Prepcast, or we just might keep it us. I think we've done a pretty good job today going over everything. So I want to thank you guys for taking some time out early on a Friday morning. I know you got a lot to do with your busy days, as we do here at Idaho Sports. Make sure you like and share on whatever you're watching this on, YouTube, Twitter, Facebooks, anywhere on the interwebs that you might be for this, so that it can get out there and be shared. Have fun tonight. Stay warm. And may your teams win. For Will Hoenike, Ryan Scaggs, I'm Paul Kingsbury. This has been the Gem State Game Day Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Have a good night, everybody.